Good evening and welcome to this meeting of our Planning Committee this evening. My name is Councillor Penny Rivers and I am the chair of this committee and will be chairing this evening. Members and officers, please raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak, and please keep your microphones on mute when you are not speaking. Please can I also ask that all questions are kept brief and to the point. And I'd like to remind ward councillors to sit separately from the committee while applications in their ward are being considered and voted on. And furthermore, it is important that we are seen to make our decisions here in this room. So with that in mind, please do not be distracted by mobile phones or screens, as our focus must be on planning. We will have to be in this room for the entire presentation and discussion in order to vote. So agenda item number 1, apologies for absence and substitutions. Kim.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Beeman and Councillor White, who have removed themselves from the meeting so that they can speak on item 1. Excuse me. And we also have apologies from Councillor Keane, who is unwell. Councillor MacLeod is here to substitute, and Councillor Andrew Lawton also. Councillor MacLeod will be removing himself for one of the items, as well as, and also Councillor Weldon will be removing himself for one of the items.
Thank you, Kim. Minutes of the last meeting, do I have your agreement to sign those minutes?
Agreed.
Thank you. Declarations of interest, Kim, are there any?
None received prior to the meeting.
Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chair. Non-pecuniary, and I'm a member of the Liberal Democrats, so under items 604, 61 and 462, I thought I ought to make people aware, because that's the same of the clubhouse and I've been there many times.
Thank you. As are several of us, so yes, please raise your hands if you have a similar interest. Thank you. Agenda item 4, questions by members of the public. Kim, are there any?
We had one question received from Brian Edmonds, which I believe the Executive Director of Planning is going to address.
Thank you. Claire.
So, members, just to make you aware of the question that's been asked, there's quite a lot of script behind the question, but the question is, please advise why in 2018, please advise why the 2018 unsigned screening opinion from Farnham Cox 320 dwelling development meets the necessarily legal experts requirements for the Cox Bridge development. Members, this relates to quite a technical matter, as I'm sure you'll conclude from that question, and not something that relates to this evening's application. So I will be responding to Mr. Edmonds via email, answering his question.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, questions from members. Kim, are there any?
None received.
No. Agenda item 6, any relevant updates? Claire, is there anything?
Members, as you probably all are aware, there has been a change in government, and very high on the new government's agenda is changes to the planning system. You will be not surprised to hear that we are monitoring closely what will come out over the next few weeks, and we will be briefing members what that means to the planning system nationally, to Waverley and to you as a planning committee.
Thank you. Now we come to our applications, and the first is WA 2023 01467 land at Old Park Lane, Farnham. This is an outline application with all matters reserved except access for up to 83 dwellings, including 24 affordable ones, and public open space and country park, including related play space, community orchard, wildlife pond, internal access roads, footways and footpaths, and drainage basins and corridor. Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor. Good evening, members. Before I start this presentation, there are plans on the table by on the way in. They are plans of the access that we all noted on our site visit on Friday morning at 10 a.m. They're basically the route through Keepsake Close and Cascade Way into the development itself, and also a plan of the landscaping. This is a landscaping plan. Also, you'll have been circulated a copy of Richard Cooper's note. Richard, unfortunately, in County Highways couldn't join us on Friday morning. And a number of you members had questions about the access to the site, why Old Park Lane couldn't be used, and why vehicles were coming through Abbey View development. They've been answered in full in Richard's update to you. He talks about the access strategy. He talks about proposed traffic generation. He goes on then about traffic flows, traffic impact assessment, goes on to the road safety, and finally he talks about the construction traffic management strategy. And in the report, condition 17 requests a construction transport management plan. Also, there's an update sheet, members. Now, the update sheet goes back to the issues raised by members on the morning, including the ward councillor too, who was present, about the access through Abbey View. And those are addressed in this document in the update sheet item 1, which summarises partly Richard's comments about the access, why Old Park Lane wasn't acceptable, and why Abbey View through that site is acceptable. Now, the second item, item 2 on the update sheet, is something that Councillor Clark kindly raised at the chairman's briefing on Monday morning. Jeanette, local Jeanette, has actually written to you all the members, about what she calls anomalies in the report about the landscape and visual impact assessment and the views through to St Andrew's Church Grade 1 listed. I've been back to the landscape architects from the applicant Gleeson Homes, and they say they have made an error in one of the annex in the amended March edition of the LVIA, the Landscape Vision Impact Assessment, included the wrong image, which blocked views of the church. That was their fault. They accept that. But the judgment in the officer's report on the impact on the St Andrew's Church was based on the initial LVIA, and the wording in the amended LVIA is the same. So the judgment that we've made in terms of the impact on St Andrew's Church is correct. It's just the anomaly was this one annex photograph in the back of the March edition was wrong. Members, thank you for that. Just to point that out. So the application itself, members, is outline application for access only for up to 83 dwellings with 24 affordable on the land known as, we know it as land off Old Park Lane, but accessed through Cascade Way and Keepsake Close. This will include a community parkland, community orchard, wildlife ponds, footways, and also, at our insistence, we're talking about infiltration basins and swales. This is the site itself. So you see my cursor, we've got the site itself here. Abbey View development, the Taylor Wimpey development to the south. Now, the majority of the objections we've received, and they've been actually chronicled in the committee report, are from the Abbey View development. We've also received objections from residents on Old Park Lane. Now, the access will go, is proposed to go through Abbey View. So basically, in terms of location, you've got the University of Creative Arts to the south, Abbey View. You've got Farnham Castle, showed ancient monument. And you've got, within 10 minutes walk of the town centre itself. So that gives you an idea of the bearings. The next one is an illustrative master plan. Copies of this plan are actually available on the table at reception. This shows the footprint where up to 83 dwellings could go, where the access would go, and also where the drainage would go in terms of surface drainage, and where the features are in terms of community orchards, the parkland itself, and the play areas, the leaps and laps themselves. To give you an impression that this site can accommodate up to 83 dwellings. And condition 4 is that it's restricted to up to 83 dwellings, and that alone on this site itself. The next one is the parameters plan. Now, this has been amended because working with our Council's Historic Buildings Officer, we were concerned about views through to St Andrew's Church. Now, if they stick with this parameters plan, you retain those views. Also, you get the housing. You see the pink up to 2-storey and the brown, the beige, single-storey. On the site itself, you get the site of the pond as well in the middle of the site, the play areas, the orchards, the layout, all next to the existing built-up area boundary of Farnham, up tight against that. There's the university. Here's a Taylor Wimpey development. The next one shows all the footpaths on the site, including St Swithin's Way. You've got this route comes off Old Park Lane itself along the northern boundaries. Is footpath number 94. You've got number 92 along the eastern boundary, and footpath number 7 strikes right through the development, but again straddled by the residential. There were some objections about a footpath to the south. There's no footpath along the southern boundary, but what this development would do in terms of housing would create footpath routes within the southern part of the site itself. The next one is the plan we all saw, members, on the site visit on Friday morning. We went through, and there are copies for you all to see. This shows what needs to be done to actually accommodate access for construction vehicles and for residents if this housing development took place. Now, at the moment, the actual Taylor Wimpey development, Abbey View development can accommodate and does accommodate refuse vehicles and fire engines. It is designed and built for that. But there are slight tweaks in terms of grass verges and trees. There will be a reduction in the grass verge along this element. There are 2 houses that face onto Keepsake Close here, and they are going to lose their grass, the part of the verges, but that is highway verge. And remember, trees are going to go here. Just bear with the cursor here. Now, again, they will be replaced. They will be replaced. We have tree conditions to actually replace those trees, that they will be mitigated and compensated for. The next view, these are just views of the site taken on a mobile phone. This shows the site basically looking from the Abbey View development. This is the Abbey View development here, looking into the site itself with the trees on the site, looking in. So this is the level part of the site where the houses are going to go and the attenuation basins themselves. This is a view to the western, looking on the western boundary of the site and up to the ridge itself. This is all going to be parkland up here, community parkland. Now, the initial intention was for this to be a suitable alternative natural green space. There's sufficient space to do that, but insufficient in terms of natural England, in terms of the length of the footpaths. So that's what we're looking at in terms of SANG and the mitigation, the impact of this on the special protection area, looking at Church Crookham in Herts, which again is identical to what the Abbey View development does. This is the view into the site. This is from the site itself, looking down Keepsake Close, looking at the cars and the grass verge, part of which will be taken out, the highway verge to be taken out to accommodate it. And this is a view from the site, from Keepsake Close into the site itself. It looks on the ground like a natural extension, like phase 2 of the Abbey View development. This is a view of Old Park Lane. You've got Farnham Castles this way, the site's here, the site's up this route. County Highways were adamant we conditioned this that no access whatsoever is taken down Old Park Lane into the site in terms of construction or future residence. So this is the route itself, and then there's a trackway off here. This is the view of the track itself. Now this track runs, this is St Swithin's Way, into the site itself. So these next are just views at the top end of the site from Old Park Lane into the site. And this last one is literally from St Swithin's Way, looking into the site itself, where the houses will be in the dip over here. This will be open parkland and community orchard. Now the issues are addressed in the report, and we've known for the last 12 months that 83 dwellings, 24 homes. It's a site that is not allocated in the local plan part 1, 2018, nor is it in the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan 2020 as an allocation. I understand it's now been put forward as a call for sites, but it's not in the development plan. It's outside, but immediately adjacent to the built-up area boundary of Farnham. It's a 10-minute walk from the town centre, and the plans themselves include improving connectivity footways into the town itself. Access, as I said, through Keepsake Close. No access from Old Park Lane, and the site does have very positive benefits, including the community parkland, the orchards, the play areas, the drainage, and the like. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We have 5 speakers, and the first is Catherine Powell. Catherine, you have 4 minutes.
I'm here to speak on behalf of nearly 400 residents who have objected to this application. The officer's report confirms that the NPPF gives significant weight to the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan as it is less than 5 years old. This site is not designated in the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan and is only accessible through the newly constructed Abbey View estate, requiring roads to be reprofiled, verges and trees lost. Hardly acceptable. The impact on all residents will be very significant. The officer's report completely ignores some of the FMP policy requirements. The proposed SANG is in Hampshire. Contrary to the officer's report, it is not compliant with FMP 12. It is not readily accessible by sustainable modes of transport, as there are no buses or safe cycling routes. It is not well connected, as it is 6 kilometres away. Residents would need to travel past both the Farnham Park Sang and Spa, so it is highly unlikely to divert or intercept trips to the Spa. The Waverley local plan acknowledges the main settlements can only take so much housing. Farnham, like other settlements, is delivering on housing, but with no new infrastructure. Constraints have been identified, but only some have been included in the officer's report. There is no mention of the local education authority's response, which states there are currently no spaces in Farnham for additional secondary pupils. Additional spaces will need to be commissioned to accommodate the pupil demand. Previous reports have said the existing schools cannot be expanded and no new school sites have been identified. Secondary school children are already having to go to Ash. I know, as I am personally involved in this issue. Thames Water has stated the existing foul water network cannot accommodate the proposed development. The condition requested by them is woeful. New foul water infrastructure takes years to plan, let alone deliver. Sadly, WC Planning has yet again approached the wrong supplier for fresh water, so there is no response from South East Water. The Waverley Infrastructure Delivery Plan says there isn't sufficient capacity. This site has an acknowledged flood corridor. The SUDS design includes significant underground storage under all the roads. The SUDS design includes small orifices, less than 10 millimetres, as small as 10 millimetres in diameter, a 5p coin. The developer's own flood risk assessment states restrictors below 50 millimetres in diameter are prone to blockage and, if blocked, could result in widespread flooding. Unfortunately, the SUDS guidance provides no constraints on orifice size, so the lead flood authority can only say the SUDS design ticks the boxes and hope for a miracle by requesting a condition for robust maintenance forever. I raised this with officers, but there is nothing in the report. Contrary to the officers' report, Surrey Highways do not consider the package of measures secured as significant. In December, they recommended refusal, saying the impacts would be severe. The mitigation measures were assembled under extremely short timeline pressure, and the developers simply came back and said they would deliver them all. This application is contrary to many FMP policies and NPPF paragraphs, including FMP 1, 10 and 12, and FNP paragraphs 56, 99, 135F, 173 and 180. Please refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. The next speaker is Sarah Hockin. Sarah, you two have 4 minutes from when you start.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, councillors. My client welcomes your planning officer's recommendation to approve this outline application. It is not the intention to repeat the thorough assessment of relevant material considerations in the committee report. However, there are some matters important to highlight. Firstly, this proposal has been carefully considered to successfully integrate with the landscape and heritage setting of North Farnham. As identified on the parameter plans, the extent of the proposed residential area is restricted to the lower lying land within the southern and western parts of the site, with single-storey dwellings proposed within the northern development area. Consequently, a majority of the site, over 8 hectares and 66% of the site, is proposed as public open space, incorporating a community orchard, new native trees and hedge planting, and a wildlife pond to provide significant biodiversity enhancements, with additional footpaths providing an attractive route for future as well as existing residents to enjoy. The proposed development of up to 83 dwellings, including 24 affordable units to meet the extensive local need, will also be relatively low density at a minimum of 17 dwellings per hectare. Your landscape and conservation officers have raised no objection on this basis. Secondly, the location of the site is in very close proximity to Farnham Town Centre, with nearby existing facilities and services readily accessible on foot or bike. A suitable legal obligation will also include upgrades to various pedestrian crossings and a bus stop on walking routes to the town centre. In addition to the secure cycle storage throughout the site, my client has also committed to providing an e-bike for each dwelling for future encouragement. Thirdly,
Members of the public, please would you listen in silence? Thank you.
Thirdly, access will involve minor works to realigning curbs, parking spaces and verges along Keepsake Close and Cascade Way within the recently completed Abbey View development. Neither Surrey County Highways nor your tree officer have raised an objection to the proposals. Fourthly, my client has undertaken extensive engagement with Surrey County Council as the lead flood local authority, who are satisfied that the proposed drainage scheme meets all necessary requirements subject to the conditions. The overall discharge rate from the site will be less than the natural discharge from the undeveloped site and will not result in an increased flood risk to the proposed development or neighbouring uses. Finally, in addition to the generous on-site public open space, which is in excess of the policy requirement, my client will also secure appropriate alternative natural green space at Nash's Wood to mitigate the impacts of the Thames Basin SPA, and Natural England have raised no objection on this basis. This is the same area used to mitigate the recently approved development at Abbey View. The proposal has evolved following a detailed negotiation with officers, and we have now arrived at this evening's planning committee with no objections from statutory consultees. It is the professional opinion of your officers that the application should be approved, and my client endorses this conclusion and respectfully requests that the permission is granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We now have 3 councillors. Councillor Hess, you are the first and you have 4 minutes. Yes.
Good evening, Chair and colleagues. I'm here this evening to represent Farnham Town Council's objection to this outline application for access to a speculative development of up to 83 houses on land to the south of Old Park Lane, Farnham. The basis of Farnham Town Council's objection to this current application is that the site is not an allocated site in the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, and that the access being considered in this application is completely unacceptable, since the proposals would have a negative impact on residents, with the access proposed going right through the middle of the existing development of 120 dwellings at Abbey View, with large construction vehicle movements, changes to no-through roads, loss of on-street parking bays, loss of newly established green verges and street trees, and permanent access over public footpaths, with no consideration to Surrey's Healthy Streets requirements. Furthermore, the proposed development is located outside the built-up area boundary and is in an area of strategic visual importance, which is in place to protect areas on the edges of settlements that are vulnerable to development pressure, which this site clearly is. In the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, Policy FNP 30, Transport Impact of Development, proposals should meet the following criteria: safely located vehicle and pedestrian access, and development proposals would not significantly add to traffic congestion in the town. These are not met, as this proposed development will inevitably increase traffic. Surrey Highways themselves estimate an additional 400 vehicle movements a day in Crondall Lane. And in fact, I spoke to 4 residents in Crondall Lane this morning, and it's already a nightmare at certain times, with the parked cars on the western side of Crondall Lane causing a pinch point, and cars back up all the way past Cascade Way. Then there's sewage, already understood to be at capacity, doctors and dentist provision under-provided, and the need for school places, already touched upon by Councillor, my previous colleague. Our local infrastructure is already over capacity. The cumulative impact of the proposals must be considered along with other developments in the area. The 120 homes Abbey View development has only recently been built out, and the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan allocation, FNP 14G, Coxbridge Farm on West Street, has outlined planning permission for 320 dwellings. A further development in this area will exacerbate the already constrained infrastructure. The perverse situation we find ourselves in is that the current neighbourhood plan is in force until 2032 and benefits from 5 years protection from speculative development and has allocated sufficient housing for Farnham. It was adopted by the local planning authority, this council, Waverley, and it's again being overridden by a recommendation for approval by Waverley. So Farnham Town Council comes before this committee to defend the very purpose of neighbourhood plans, not just Farnham's, but other towns and parishes in Waverley with neighbourhood plans. So I ask colleagues this evening to please refuse this application unanimously. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. Councillor Beeman, you have 4 minutes from when you start.
Thank you very much. This planning application raises a fundamental question over the status of the Waverley Local Plan and Farnham Neighbourhood Plan. Members have been assured on several occasions that both the Waverley Local Plan and Farnham Neighbourhood Plan still carry weight when considering any planning application. And indeed, the recent revision to the NPPF, which is still valid, extended the validity of Farnham's Neighbourhood Plan until April 2025. This application is for residential development at a location not designated for such development in Farnham's Neighbourhood Plan. So why has the planning officer therefore put forward approval for this development? The reason given is in fact because Waverley is unable to identify a 5-year housing land supply. We've been in a similar situation before. Both the recent Monkton Lane and Waverley Lane applications were recommended for approval by planning officers and then overturned and rejected by members of the planning committee, since neither location were designated sites for development in the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, only to be allowed on appeal. In respect of the Waverley Lane appeal, this decision is now currently subject to statutory review, which has been pursued by Farnham Town Council with support from Waverley. Again, in both these applications, the decision of officers to approve was based on Waverley's lack of a 5-year housing land supply. The decision of planning officers appears to be dictated solely by the lack of a 5-year housing land supply, rather than being plan-led. This cannot be right. The decision to extend the life of neighbourhood plans, of Farnham's neighbourhood plan, from 3 to 5 years makes it even more critical that planning application decisions are plan-led, rather than dictated by the lack of a 5-year housing land supply. The planning officer's report states in the absence of a 5-year housing land supply, there should be a presumption in favour of sustainable development. Well, permission should be granted unless there are any adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The key word is sustainable. Some aspects of this application can be described as being sustainable. It's development within close proximity to the town centre and all the services it provides within walking distance. There are, however, significant social, economic and environmental consequences of approving applications on land not allocated for development in the Waverley Local Plan and Farnham Neighbourhood Plan. Surrey County Highways, the statutory consultancy seems to change from time to time, and are engaged in objections subject to, and finally we had no objections subject to conditions. But, and here is a big but, I would add as a point of detail, in fact, that we did not put forward Old Park Lane as an alternative to Keysake Close and Cascade Way because we knew that was unacceptable. Members who attended the site visit that was held on Friday will have seen with their own eyes the unsuitability of proposed access to the new development through roads in the Abbeyview estate, particularly through the construction phase and generally. In addition, as already pointed out by Catherine Powell and George Hess, there will be other reasons: high flooding risk, genuine concerns over ability to handle additional wastewater, lack of adequate education places and sports pitches, and so on and so on. These consequences could be offset by greater investment in basic infrastructure, but there is insufficient investment at the levels required to meet the additional demands of applications that have already been approved on appeal on land not allocated for development. Decisions on all planning applications need to be plan-led and not solely dictated by lack of a 5-year housing land supply. There are good planning reasons why this application should not be approved. This does not necessarily mean that there should not be any development ever at this site, but some development could be justified if it was truly sustainable. This application is not sustainable development and should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beeman. Councillor White, you too have 4 minutes from when you start.
Thank you, Madam Chair, fellow councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Technical issues as to why this outline planning application for access is totally inappropriate have been and will be fully explained by my learned colleagues who are also speaking on this same, who have also spoken on this same item. As co-ward councillor for the ward in which the subject site resides, I would like to try to inform you before and after this debate from an elected councillor perspective, having balanced and weighed the extraordinary situation that planning policy has placed on my constituents. When the first chosen access to this site from the A287 via Old Park Lane was refused by SCC Highways, the developer of the adjacent Abbeyview housing scheme proposed an alternative access through their development. Cynically, a very healthy 50-year-old poplar tree was pulled down to make way for this access just 1 week before a TPO was placed on all the remaining trees on the same boundary. Some residents of the Abbeyview development bought their properties in Keepsake Close expecting a no-through road, as I believe is the established meaning of the word close. Many of the residents were sold properties in the belief that they would have wide, smart street environments. Long-standing members of the Farnham community moving into retirement wanted to downsize to release equity for their children. They were attracted by the proximity to Farnham town, but also the feeling of open space created by the boulevard style, as is indicated in the name Cascade Way, meaning wide and flowing. Incidentally, Cascade is also a type of hop, native to Farnham, which challenged the formidable Kent growing hops because of its high yield potential. The last remaining site of these hop fields, resulting in much of the wealth and the many heritage buildings that Farnham has today, will have 83 spec-built houses sitting on it if this application is successful. Now, the life of the residents of Keepsake Close and Cascade Way will be one of noise, dust, vibration and danger during the widening of the roads, and then it will have to experience vehicles swinging round in front of their properties to enter the new site, and houses at the junction of Keepsake Close and Cascade Way will have to endure the same problems. It seems incongruous to me that during the construction phase, a cement silo, an 8-wheeler 20-ton trucks, 40-foot low loaders with back actors, associated heavy machinery, and continuous deliveries of construction materials will all have to pass through this junction and then enter the restricted access between number 3 and number 16 Keepsake Close. Both occupants with their young families, with their pavement frontage halved to accommodate the required road width, whatever happened to the SCC Healthy Streets design plan. During the construction phase and after completion, the residents of Abbey View will also have to suffer queues to get out of their estate during the day. This in addition to up to a quarter of a mile of queuing traffic down Crondall Lane that already exists at peak times at the junction with Crondall Lane and West Street. The Planning Authority has placated SCC Highways concerns for traffic overload at this junction with a proposal to move a bus stop and install tactile paving on pedestrian routes in order to encourage residents to leave their cars on the drive and walk. Problem solved? Really? The material fact that must be upheld is loss of amenity, and I refer to MPPF 135F, and I haven't got time to quote it. It charged that 70+ families who in good faith bought their properties with tree-lined, low vehicle density roads, with raised pedestrian crossing offering convenient access to the road network, with a peaceful atmosphere of safe, attractive paths and green spaces, have been knowingly undersold. I move to ask that this is defeated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Now, councillors, do you have questions for officers before we debate this? Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chair. On page 11, under the consultations, it says quite clearly that Surrey Police, no objection, subject to a condition requiring the development to achieve a secured by design accreditation. The site, when I looked at what you've got, has a number of footpaths. The Surrey Police may well decide to look at those because it may be considered a porous site. If they didn't achieve that, can I ask the officers what they would do?
I think it would be difficult for officers to start redesigning the scheme this evening. Obviously, we would work with the secure by design specialists together with our urban designers and others to look at how this could be addressed if it wasn't delivered in the way soon. But I think this evening, Councillor, we're not going to be able to confirm what that redesign would look like.
I understand that. I'm just concerned that if it didn't get passed and we're looking at the plan with showing those bits, do they stay in and then you redesign it, or does it come back, or what happens? I'll just have to accept that could you come back here if it did fail?
If it would depend on what was involved and whether or not it sat within what was agreed by the committee tonight. So again, it would be subject to the detail of what happened next.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. A question for Michael. I heard you say this question is about resident amenity, and I heard you say earlier that the existing roads in Abbey View can accommodate a refuse truck. But of course, a refuse truck only comes round once a week. And it's certainly not the hundreds of vehicle movements per day as mentioned in the applicant's transport assessment. Now, policy TD1 of the local plan seeks to ensure that new development is designed to create safe and attractive environments that meet the needs of users. So my question is, does the amenity of the residents outside the red line of the new development become, or is it a material planning consideration relevant to this application?
Yes, it is, sir. Basically, in terms of material consideration, we have to consider the impact on the residents in the surrounding areas, not just with the red line. Basically, we have to take on board the comments of the local residents and the impact in terms of HGV movements. And that's what we have here. Unfortunately, Councillor Harris can't be here today. Councillor Harris have raised no objection. But I think the note that's actually been provided is very clear about access, about accommodating numbers of vehicles in terms of HGVs, in terms of refuse vehicles, quite clearly sets that out, but it is achievable.
Can I just add to that? Obviously, there's two issues here. There's a technical issue in highway terms, whether something works or not, and that's the remit of the county surveyor. Now, it may be that the county surveyor says something technically works, but as a planning authority, we decide that in delivering that technical solution, there is impact on amenity, and they are two separate judgments for you to make as a planning committee this evening.
Thank you. Councillor White, your microphone is on, so you might want to turn that off. Is that a question, Councillor Austin? Yes.
Thank you. Just a couple of more technical things. So I understood, Stan, from one of the speakers, that South East Water or Southern Water were not consulted. Is that correct? And if so, we're talking about infrastructure issues. I just want to know how much weight we should be placing on that generally, because drinking water is pretty important, having the water and knowing that this development will have it. And secondly, I was going through a number of the objections, and I see that some of the reports, for example, things like the BAT report is out of date. It's meant to be 2 years from 2021. How relevant and material is that to us in our decision making? Thanks.
Thank you. On that, in terms of the bats first, in terms of ecology, we've been working closely with Surrey Wildlife Trust since the application came in, and we both have been assessing all the documentation, and we've got a comprehensive raft of conditions to impose if planning permission were to be granted at outline to actually cover this. Everything from bats to biodiversity net gain are conditioned in the report. About 32 conditions. A host of those include ecological ones. And in terms of consultations, we consult the lead local flood authority, Thames Water and Southern Water. And Thames Water have come back with their comment, no objection with condition, Southern Water, and the lead local flood authority, detailed comments throughout. Basically from an objection over the underground tanks, all the way through to surface water drainage, in terms of SUDS hierarchy, in terms of ponds and swales. So we're working very closely on terms of hydrology, in terms of drinking water and wastewater at this site. And we think on balance, this site works, therefore recommending approval with conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. So, councillors, we are now open for debate. Councillor MacLeod.
Sorry, I wanted to follow up in the answer to that question, if I may. I mean, I'm a customer. I live in Farnham, so I know the water companies involved. Thames Water deal with drainage. South East Water deal with the drinking water supply. And the point made by one of the speakers was that there was no reference to the drinking water supply. Thames Water just don't deal with the drinking water supply. I think what Councillor Austin was asking is how relevant is it the fact that there's no response from South East Water, and I don't think you really addressed that in your answer, unless I misunderstood the situation.
In terms of drinking water, South East Water and drinking water, in terms of developments, these all developments are balanced in terms of infrastructure, and if there's a issue with drinking infrastructure, this development would go towards SIL, would pay SIL, community infrastructure levy monies towards including water supplies.
No, sorry, just to clarify that point, SIL is not used for drinking water. So members, you've got in front of you the comments that Southern Water were consulted on this application. No response was received from them, so they neither objected to the proposal or supported the proposal. It's literally no comment. So members, we consult Southern Water on all applications that are relevant to them, that will put additional demand for drinking water in the area. We are fully aware of, as I'm sure you know, of the water issues within the borough, and are mindful of that. But obviously there are, as you all, I think, probably are beginning to become very aware, statutory obligations on water authorities to do certain things and deliver supplies. So members, I don't think we can go any further in that the Southern Water haven't responded to this planning application, and therefore that is on that basis that you're being asked to make a decision this evening.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. Did you have another point?
Sorry, it's the same point. Sorry, I don't like to be pedantic, and I fully respect the planning officers and so on. I'm not trying to call them pedantic, create what might be, in their view, a minor point. But the point is that Southern Water are not involved in this at all. The two water authorities in Farnham are Thames Water, who deal with drainage, and South East Waters, who deal with the drinking supply, the fresh water supply. So it's got nothing to do with Southern Water. It's only a matter for there may have been some confusion that caused this, but I think the point has to be made, and I think the point Councillor Austin was making was asking what was the relevance of the fact that there was no response from the drinking water supply, which isn't actually Southern Water, it's actually South East Water. And sorry to be pedantic, and I don't want to cause the officers problems actually on what they might be seen as a technical point, but it seems to be an important point.
I don't think there's anything further we can add, that you've stated the facts and you've got the comments on the report.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn.
You'd be glad to know I have no intention of talking about water. I'm going to talk about history to begin with. Site selection in the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan was delegated at the local plan hearing way back. There has never been any doubt about who selects sites for the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan. It was agreed with Waverley. Waverley we agreed on the strategic sites that are in Local Plan Part 1, and anything in Local Plan Part 2, it doesn't refer to Farnham because site selection was delegated directly to the Town Council. When we did the site selection, and I should just say the site selection has been out to 2 referendums, not just one. So the people of Farnham have actually endorsed the site selections that we made twice. But when we were choosing the sites, I've said this before in this chamber, we didn't get a big map and a pin. We walked every inch of these sites, and I mean that, every single one. And when we drew the built-up area boundary, when we reviewed the latest plan, we looked at the boundary again to see whether we'd got the built-up area boundary in the right place. We made a few changes where some speculative development had taken place, but basically we agreed the built-up area boundary. That has also been endorsed by the town twice, at least, in referendum. We drew the built-up area boundary quite deliberately here, so that we would have the ASVI protected, because it says very clearly in the neighbourhood plan that outside the revised built-up area boundary, priority will be given to protecting the countryside. That's stated quite clearly in the neighbourhood plan. And it goes on to say that the plan seeks only limited development outside. And it goes on to explain sometimes it's agricultural buildings, but we have not, in the plan, we have nowhere stated that it is acceptable to build up to 83 dwellings. It just isn't included in the plan. We have got enough for the allocation that we actually had at the time. And I would just like to read out paragraph 14, which seems to be put to one side. There's two paragraphs of the MPPF which are important. There's 11D, which triggers the automatic sort of tilted balance. And then there's paragraph 14, which somebody has mentioned was updated in December 23. In situations where the presumption at paragraph 11D applies to applications involving the provision of housing, the adverse impact of allowing development that conflicts with the neighbourhood plan is likely to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, provided the following apply. A, the neighbourhood plan became part of the development plan 5 years or less before the date of this decision, which it did. And the neighbourhood plan contains policies and allocations to meet its identified housing requirement. And at the moment, we are still protected by that paragraph 14 in the neighbourhood plan. And I honestly don't think that the 5-year housing land supply across the borough it means that we could tear up the neighbourhood plan at this point. I think it's so important to these people that worked so hard on the neighbourhood plan, who came out and voted, see that what they were saying was important, and we've respected their opinion. I've never understood why people question, if you like, the decision of these people who wrote the neighbourhood plan. You know, how is your knowledge any better than the cumulative knowledge of all the town, you know, and the village, if it's a village? I just don't see it. So I have a real problem with this. I think in policy terms, the Farnham neighbourhood plan should take priority, and this application is contrary to both the neighbourhood plan, the development plan, policies quite frequently occurring in the neighbourhood plan. And I'll name them later if necessary. The other thing that really worries me about this, and I've said this before in other forums, the effect on the existing amenity of the residents of Cascade Way, Keepsake Close. It's lovely when you walk down there. They've got these wide streets, they've got the grass verges, the street trees. It's going to turn into something, or it was going to turn into something really attractive, something that was acceptable to the town and a highly sustainable location. What is proposed, and we've heard all sorts of things about what's going to be proposed on this ASVI, which is already a beautiful space that people can walk across. It's already got trees and grass and all the other things that they're going to put into this site, having dug up most of it to put 83 houses on. And what really upsets me is that these people are going to have their roads, well, their pavements taken away, their parking spaces, the road is going to be narrowed. The whole reason that this particular development is attractive seems to me to be torn up just to get access to the 83 houses on a site which is protected by ASVI, isn't allocated in either the neighbourhood plan or the local plan. And I'm so disappointed that we're here tonight having to defend yet another site in the neighbourhood plan. And somebody mentioned something about they get turned over at appeal. Not all of them. Not all of them, please. You know, we'd go along to the appeals and we put up, and we have lost some and we have won some. But when we have a site as blatant as this that completely ignores the Farnham neighbourhood plan, despite the changes to paragraph 14 in November 2023, I really find it so disappointing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Earwicker.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. I probably can't speak as eloquently as Councillor Coburn, but having been a councillor at Farnham Town Council for 4 years when Councillor Coburn was there, I've learnt a great deal. So I'd like to refer to policy, and Councillor Coburn got in before me. This site is not a housing allocation under FNP 14 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan. And on that basis only, this should be refused. Also, this site is outside of the built-up area boundary, contrary to policy FNP 10, protect and enhance the countryside, and its focus on preserving the countryside from inappropriate development. The area is designated an area of strategic visual importance in place to protect areas vulnerable to development pressure. This intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside must be recognised and safeguarded, as stated in the local plan, Part 1 policy RE1, Countryside Beyond the Greenbelt. Also, the proposals will have a negative impact on the existing development to the south from additional vehicle movements, changes to no-through roads, potential loss of on-street parking bays and green boundaries, conflicting with policy FNP 30, transport impact of development, with no consideration of healthy streets for Surrey guidance. And last but not least, in the MPPF dated 20th December 2023, Local Plan Part 1 Policy TD1, Landscape and Design states, account will be taken of design guidance adopted by the Council, including design and development briefs. On that basis alone, I will be voting to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to say something similar to Councillor Coburn, but I'm going to do the words in a different order. As committee members, consistency with the development plan should always be a part of our assessment of planning applications. The updated NPPF paragraph 14, as we've heard, boosts the importance of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan as it is less than 5 years old and contains housing site allocations. The assessment of adverse impacts versus benefits is a matter for planning judgment and varies with each and every application. Our planning officer has set out his judgment. Members of the committee now need to consider their judgment by determining what tips the scale in this application. Do the adverse impacts demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the proposed development or not? I'll leave it with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Weldon.
Thank you. We've heard some very strong, powerful arguments against this application. In particular, we've heard very strong arguments that it contravenes the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, and that is important. We absolutely must respect neighbourhood plans. I was served on the Hazelmere Neighbourhood Plan, and I really value the importance of neighbourhood plans. However, we have a fundamental problem in terms of the national planning framework, which states very, very well, we are not meeting our 5-year housing expectation, and that presents a major problem. Now, the framework says very clearly that if we are not meeting that 5-year expectation, then there must be a presumption in favour of sustainable development, largely defined in terms of access to facilities. This location is eminently sustainable on that basis. The guidance goes on to say there must be a presumption in favour of sustainable development unless there is demonstrable harm. Now, I've heard the arguments, but I've also looked at the statutory responses. And other than the responses from Farnham Council and Farnham Society and one from the CPRA, I have not seen evidence of serious harm. My view, therefore, is that in principle, we should be supporting it. So let's consider the neighbourhood plan. We've heard, and I accept, that the plan does allocate housing. It does allocate sites. The problem is that in terms of that 5-year expectation, we are not judged on the allocation of sites. We are judged on housing completions, and we are falling short. I'm not sure that Farnham is in fact meeting the allocation in terms of housing completions. I think that I'll leave it at that. I think this deserves support. If we don't support applications outside the built-up area, and this one is right adjacent to the built-up area, where are we going to do it? We're not going to find sizable sites within the town. I think we must support it.
Thank you, Councillor Weldon, and your microphone's on. Councillor Austin.
Thank you. I've got sort of 5 main points really where I have concerns. Infrastructure, number one, that is demonstrably an issue in this area, and that's one that was repeated in the many objections. Very well, actually 2 and 3 go together. The amenity for residents outside existing residents. We have said and agreed that that is material, and I think that what the evidence I've seen is that that is demonstrable harm actually to those people who live on the existing sites. And therefore, on that one alone, actually, the adverse impacts outweigh the benefits. But sort of moving on to, I said I had 5 points, but I have 4 points. There are, next, we're always talking about how everything must be plan-led. And what is the point of us having neighbourhood plans that we spend years organising, communities spend time working out exactly where development should go if we then completely disregard it? As Councillor Coburn, Councillor Hess, Councillor Beeman, Councillor White, Councillor Ewaker, Councillor Clark have all said, we must have reference to the neighbourhood plan, or what does it mean? It means nothing. And I think that that rule applies. It's so important that we adhere to that rule, because otherwise, why are we all here? What are we all doing? FNP 10 finally states that the BT built up area outside states priority must be given to countryside. It's countryside, those beautiful photos of it. I think that importance should be given to that. Therefore, I will be not supporting this application.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Before there are any other speakers, we're going to go to Claire for some advice.
Yeah, so members, just on a point of clarification, and I think Councillor Clark actually very eloquently summarised the planning situation, but I have heard a number of members say this evening that if this is binary, if you've got a plan and it's outside the plan, then it can be refused. I think members, you all know that that isn't the case, and the report clearly sets out the weight to be given to paragraph 14 of the NPPF, and also confirms that you're still looking at the planning balance, and obviously the fact there is no 5-year housing land supply has to play into that balance. So members, I can hear that we're beginning to get some sounds that members will not be supporting this application, and that must play out in the next part of this meeting. But I do strongly advise you that if you are thinking of moving a recommendation for refusal, you think very carefully at what the reason for that refusal is. And simply the fact there is a neighbourhood plan is not a sustainable reason for refusal, and we will not be able to defend that at appeal. So I'll just leave that thought with you because I'm sounding a bit grumpy now. And it's always the hard part of the meeting when I have to say those grumpy words. But nevertheless, it is my duty to properly advise you of the planning position to help you inform your decision making this evening.
Thank you. And may I just remind the public gallery to be silent. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to get technical and state various items in local plans, etc., except to say that we have to maximise the quality of life and health, both for our current as well as our future residents. And clearly this is not happening to the residents of Abbey View. I was quite concerned when I actually went up and looked at the site about 8 or 9 weeks ago, and then to read all the various objections to the plan. And one of the things that has not been really mentioned much tonight is the flooding that you have had to contend with as residents of Abbey View. And the thought of another 83 houses with roofs, driveways, roads, etc., is going to add tremendously to the runoff that is going to go towards Abbey View. Now, I know the developer has sort of stated that they have done assessments, and but it also has been mentioned earlier this evening, I think by Councillor Powell, that the actual diameter of the pipes that they're using is the size of a 5p piece. That is going to clog. And having seen what the residents of Abbey View have had to go through during the last few years, I just think unless we're extremely careful, we're going to add further to the Abbey View residents' problems with flooding. And I don't think we should be taking responsibility for that. We really need to think very carefully before we allow this development. We've got to be absolutely sure that the conditions we put are sufficient to make sure that there is no further flooding. Certainly the conditions we imposed in 2016 on the Abbey View didn't work because we had several years of flooding. I mean, the fact that we have had to tank a garage doesn't give me any confidence about the future of flooding in Abbey View. I've also comments made about the infrastructure, the schools. I just don't see that this is a very sustainable development. We talk about being able to walk into the centre of the town. It sort of implies that maybe a lot of people are going to work in Farnham who are going to be living in these estates. I'm not sure about that. When I worked in Guildford, the company I work for, 20% of the staff came from Farnham. We can have all these things about cycling and walkways and everything else, but at the end of the day, most people would use their cars, and particularly if their children are having to go to schools in places like Ash. I just do not think this really holds water myself, and I really feel sorry for the residents of Abbey View. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers? No other speakers. So we go back to Councillors Hess, Beeman and White. You each have up to 4 minutes to speak, but
It's only Councillor Beeman and White.
I beg your pardon, Beeman and White, yes. You have up to 4 minutes. You don't have to use your 4 minutes, but is there anything further you would like to add?
Yes, thank you very much. The planning is right in some sense. This application, if the committee decides to refuse this application, the reasons for refusal are as important as the refusal itself. In fact, we've identified 10 different reasons, in fact, why this application should be refused. We've prepared a note, I can go through. Reason 1, it's contrary to the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, Waverley Local Plan and the Farnham Design Statement. Reason 2, visual impact, contrary to policy. Reason 3, surface water flooding. Reason 4, proposed sign contrary to FNP 12. Reason 5, contrary to NPPF 99. Reason 6, contrary to NPPF 135F. Reason 7, contrary to Waverley Local Plan Part 1. Reason 8, relating to affordable housing. Reason 9, flood risk assessment and conditions. And reason 10 is contrary to many other smaller planning policies. We've prepared a note. We're prepared to share this with you if you so wish, if it would help you make a sort of other recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Well, that was the punch. This is the kiss. Madam Chair, fellow councillors, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give particular thanks to the committee councillors tonight for giving their time to look at this particular application, and to those that have worked tirelessly to research and rebut the numerous claims made during the 12 months plus of this application process in order to protect the privacy and tranquility of those affected. Trevor and Sue Free, NWFRA Residents Association, the OPRA Residents Association, and Councillor Catherine Powell bringing her considerable technical skills to the fore, and many others. I'd also feel the need to commend Michael Eastham for his due diligence and endurance to try to align this proposal with policy involving probably one of the biggest lists of consultees and complainants that this planning authority has had to process in its history. Fellow committee members, the application, if voted through by yourself tonight, will not only rubbish the principle of the neighbourhood plan for Farnham, but will also devalue the neighbourhood plans for Cranley, Godalming and Hazelmere. Just out of interest, the now proposed SANG to be provided for this proposed development is a 9-mile round trip into Hampshire. This is also cynical and demonstrates the worst of our planning system. Abbey View residents pay £162 per annum for the privilege of access to this SANG, and were also given a £200 voucher per household to buy a bicycle. At least on this development, they're going to get an e-bike, so things have improved. So the residents who do not have cars and have hung up their cycle clips by necessity use the small amenity area provided behind Abbey View and, of course, the 2 public footpaths through the proposed development site, whilst at the same time being able to appreciate the space that this beautiful undulating proposed development site provides. And incidentally, already referred to by Councillor Coburn, this proposed development of up to 83 dwellings will occupy a beautiful rolling landscape designated as an area of strategic visual importance, and in brackets, subsequently removed by the planning authority in LP2. As stated previously, I charge that MPPF paragraph FP 135F has been contravened by the severe reduction of existing amenity for 20 houses fronting Cascade Way and Keepsake Close due to this ridiculous, inappropriate and out-of-scale access route through an existing residential area. My fellow committee councillors, I could go on, but you'll be pleased to hear that I'm not going to. We all know that the developer is poaching this site. Now, because of the tilted balance rule coming into play, because over 600 approved dwellings have not been built out in Farnham. This is not the fault of Farnham people. This is the fault of developers who buy land, sit on it, and then develop land which they consider they can make more profit and easier sales, particularly in the current market. The true meaning of tilted balance for my constituents is the distortion and upset that this restricted access will cause to 70 families. Madam Chair and fellow councillors, a vote against the officer recommendation tonight is essential. Thank you.
Thank you. So, as has been suggested, there may well be an alternate proposal. Is there one? Councillor Coburn.
I suggest that permission be refused.
On what grounds?
On grounds that, well, basically the harm greatly outweighs the benefits of developing this site. And then do you want me to go into all the reasons why?
Yes, please.
Pity about that. Right. Basically, we have the amenity of the existing people. We'll start with that, if you like. There's no question there's going to be extreme harm to the environment of the and amenity space of the existing development. But also, what we're saying here is that this is a sustainable site. What I'm saying is that the tilted balance that comes into play in paragraph 11D is countermanded by the provision now in paragraph 14. So in fact, we're not looking at the tilted balance. We are looking at harms and benefits relating to an up-to-date local plan, neighbourhood plan as part of that local plan. And remember, the Farnham neighbourhood plan allocates 2,780 sites. Not every neighbourhood plan allocates every single site. The neighbourhood plan does. It allocates enough sites for its allocation, which remains valid until 5 years is up. So I think the harm to the ASBI is contrary to policy RE1. I think the harm to the built-up area boundary comes under FNP 10, which also deals with the countryside, but also states quite clearly that development outside the built-up area boundary should be limited. 83 dwellings is not limited. I don't know what I've not said, but basically, I just think this is harmful to the ASVI, harmful to the existing owners and renters, whatever they are in Keepsake Close and Cascade Way and Abbey View. And this, on those grounds, should be, and I'm sure there's plenty more policies people can come up with. TD1, somebody's mentioned DM5, I think, for amenity. And then you've got your FNP1, FNP10, FNP14, FNP12, probably FNP30, but certainly, you know, it's contrary to so many policies in the development plan.
Thank you very much. It is the considered opinion, our considered expert opinion. We do not have yet grounds that can be defended. Are there other grounds?
Yes. Members, can I maybe come in and sort of maybe shape some of the conversations that I've been hearing from you in terms of the harm? It's been clearly identified that members, or some of the members, are of the view that in creating the access, the impact on amenity to existing residents and the general appearance and character of that area that was granted permission as acceptable development would be damaged and harmed. I've also heard a couple of members say that whilst mitigation has been provided by a SANG away from the site, they don't feel that this is a sustainable solution. And therefore, when we're looking at that planning balance, that this development isn't sustainable because of that mitigation and the distance that would need to be travelled to that alternative SANG, but also accepting members that obviously there is no objection to that from Natural England. They see that that is within the zone of influence and that would be acceptable. So, you know, I'm just telling you the facts there. But that is what I've heard you say. So Councillor Coburn has helpfully reeled off a list of policies, but I think for the purposes of actually shaping this reason for refusal, we need to really identify that harm that's caused the balance to tip away from being acceptable to unacceptable. So Councillor Coburn, you might want to come back and just filter down the harm.
Yes, thank you, Claire. I mean, the point is that planning decisions should be made, as we all know, in accordance with the development plan, unless there are material indications otherwise. And I maintain that we have in Farnham at the moment an up-to-date development plan, and therefore all decisions should be made in accordance with that development plan. And the up-to-date development plan is the local plan part 1 and the Farnham neighbourhood plan. So as far as I'm concerned, you start with that. This is contrary to the development plan. We've already got the harm. I mean, to me, the harm is harm to the green space that was allocated in the neighbourhood plan. When we drew the built-up area boundary, it was with a view to retaining this green space as ASVI, but certainly countryside beyond the green belt, and that's why we have policy FNP 10, and it's also protected still by policy RE1. The harm to the existing residents we've already mentioned, but the harm here is harm to our development plan. I can't see why on earth we can't just defend our development plan that has, you know, served us well. You know, we tick all the boxes for saying that this application should be determined strictly, you know, in accordance with the development plan, because there are no material. I don't understand what the material considerations are. We don't need extra houses in Farnham. I beg your pardon. We've allocated the 2780 that was there. We're actually delivering ahead of that. So I really don't see what the material considerations are to ask us now to tear up another green field or to develop another green field, put in a bit of trees and whatever, when we've got a perfectly good green space which we left for the people of Farnham to enjoy. I'm sure that's not what you wanted, Claire, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I'm trying to be helpful here, but obviously, you know, the report clearly sets out the position of the NPPF, and the fact that there is a plan in itself isn't the yes, no, you can, you can't. So reeling that back, I think, you know, what you're articulating again is that, you know, it's the loss, the planning balance is such that harm is caused to the impact on the amenity as we've described, and then that loss of that green space and the role that plays in terms of the setting, you know, within protecting the settlement, etc., etc. So I think that's what you're saying is the harm that's caused, and therefore the policy, the neighbourhood plan position should then be gone back to as your starting position.
I think that's right. I think that's what I'm trying to say, Claire. But what I'm trying to say is that the benefits that are quoted, you know, 83 extra homes, when we've allocated 2780 and don't need 83 extra homes at this particular moment, we're still delivering the 2780, which we allocated up to 2032. So we don't need an extra 83. We've got a built-up area boundary, which was revised. The built-up area boundary was redrawn deliberately to protect the green spaces. If you apply this logic, oh, well, it's next to the built-up area boundary, we can build in every single green field all the way around Farnham, because everything, or every area, is adjacent to the built-up area boundary. But we drew the built-up area boundary, and it is there to protect that area of green space which people use. So, you know, to me, I can't see the advantage in filling another green space in Farnham with 83 homes when we have actually allocated more than enough sites for the 2780 and, in fact, are delivering them. We might not be delivering them elsewhere, but we're delivering them in Farnham, I can tell you that.
So again, obviously we're still in the trying to get the reason for refusal for someone to second. And no, you can't second yet because we haven't got the reason. Sorry. And that's the chair's wrong. So going back to the suggestion made by Councillor Beeman, which was 10 reasons for refusal. I think if we look at the first reason, which is the site is outside the Divine built-up area, outside the neighbourhood built-up area, and therefore the proposed is unallocated greenfield site would lead to sort of harm in terms of visual erosion of the landscape character, and harm to the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside as your first reason for refusal. And then perhaps your second reason for refusal is the proposed development would have an unacceptable impact on existing residents in terms of the impact or in terms of the design of the proposed access road to the development and would affect the overall character of that development. And I'm not being brilliant at doing the finer words, so I think members, you know, if this goes through, then I think, you know, we will have to slightly refine those words to identify the correct policies. But I think those are perhaps the two reasons. Carol, if that's helpful.
Yes, no, I just wanted to pop in because I am worried about the vehicles going through, but I'm worried about the damage to the green aspect and character of the existing development. Because at the moment you have these broad, you know, wide pavements, green verges, trees, and they're going to be scrubbed up. So it's not just for the building, it's destroying the verdant green, developing green, because it's really, you know, coming on in leaps and bounds of the existing development.
Yeah, that's right. So I think it's something around that, the integrity of that development and what made that development acceptable in the first place, that we are then taking part of that away, and therefore if we'd been asked, would we grant planning permission for that in the absence of those things? The answer may have been no. So we're...
Thank you. I believe there's a seconder. So we have a proposal to object on grounds that we have had read again, which has been seconded. So we come now to a vote. To vote in favour of objecting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the vote is 11 in favour, no abstentions and 2 against.
Members, can I just add, we've identified 2 reasons for refusal, and we should have probably jumped in quicker, but just to confirm that members would be happy that a 3rd reason for refusal is added, and that reason relates to the lack of a 106 agreement. So it's a sort of standard reason for refusal that covers the fact that there is no 106 in place technically to provide the mitigation.
Councillor Coburn.
Great to come back, but you know, surely we should be stating this is contrary to the development plan. I mean, you know, at the beginning, I mean, it's contrary to our development plan, and we know that planning should be made in accordance with the development plan. And we also know that the updated paragraph 14 means that 11D doesn't click in. I know you can't put that in a reason for refusal, but you know, we've got to defend our development plan, surely.
So members, just to confirm what I think you voted on, and we need to be really clear on this because we don't want to end up with a judicial review on the decision we've made this evening. So what I'd read to you is the site is outside the Divine Settlement and the Farnham Neighbourhood Built Plan 2020 built up area boundary. So we are saying it's outside those boundaries. So for that reason, it is therefore proposing development on a outside settlement site, and that development would be harmful to the landscape character and intrinsic value. And then the second reason goes on to the impact on the overall amenity and quality of the adjoining development, the impact on the residents and the visual appearance of that. But members, whilst you have voted, what I'm requesting is that we add a third reason for refusal, which is a technical reason for refusal, but it's just identifying the fact that there is no section 106 in place. And as members, you know, who have lots of experience of appeals know, though, that third reason for refusal, if we get to an appeal, falls away because that will be addressed by unilateral. But nevertheless, it is important that the council, in forming the refusal, identifies that 106 isn't in place, and therefore the matters that would normally be covered by the 106 cannot be delivered at this point.
Councillor Earwicker.
Can I just confirm that what I seconded was the list of Farnham neighbourhood plan policies, the ones that I raised for 14, 10, 30, local plan, RE1. I think we've got up to about 10 policies that we were saying. Can you confirm that's the case?
So, members, can I suggest that we can either pause, we can get a neighbourhood plan and go through every policy, or we identify the policies that reflect the harm that you've identified and add those policies. Now, I don't mind which way we do it, but I mean, you have already voted without specifying each of those policies. So can I suggest that you've identified the harm without specifying every single policy, and that we actually just add the specific policies that reflect the harm that you voted on in as we finalise the draft. Members, as you know, the draft minutes are circulated tomorrow, and obviously if there's any concerns, then that is raised at the next meeting when you agree or don't agree those draft minutes.
Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand what Claire's saying, that we've voted and so on, but we seem to rush to the vote a bit quickly, actually. And I'm concerned that the reasons are not strong enough. I mean, Councillor Beeman listed more reasons than just two, and Councillor Coburn said a lot of other things that aren't reflected in what we're now saying.
Councillor
So I'm
MacLeod,
just concerned that...
may I interrupt?
Yeah.
Members of this committee were read, it was all fully discussed, seconded and voted on. So that proposal has been, we have objected to it. We're just working out how we can safely do that. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. I think what Claire is saying is that we've identified harm. The next step is to identify the policies that reflect that harm. That will be then fleshed out and will be in the minutes of this committee for us to...
Councillor Coburn.
I'm so sorry, but one of the issues we've had before is we think we've refused something, and then when we see the decision notice, we're a little bit disappointed that it hasn't, or it doesn't seem to have reflected everything that we've said in our refusal. And by the time the minutes come out, with respect, the notice has gone out. So, I do think the policies like, FMP 10, RE1, I mean, FMP 1, TD1, they're the sort of policies that are, you could do in your sleep. And as long as they all get in there, then I think we'd all be happy.
So, members, just to sort of rest assured, obviously it's our role now to defend the council's decision. So we'll be defending these reasons for refusal. Reference has been made this evening to we are obviously very experienced, qualified officers, and it's in our interest to ensure that we represent the council's case to the best of our ability and defend that case should it go to appeal. So, members, we have made a decision. You've clearly identified what the harm is, and we will ensure that we identify all the relevant policies that relate to that harm. The draft minutes will be circulated tomorrow, if there is any concern, then please contact myself or Kimberly, and who will contact me. I suggest in this instance, as there is slight concern about this, that we don't actually issue the refusal until you've agreed the minutes at the next meeting, if we're all happy with that as a way forward.
I take silence as agreement. So thank you very much. We now move on to our next application, but yes, we'll have a 5-minute break, but I'm just going to remind councillors in this room not to be distracted by telephone screens or screens. We have to be seen to be making a fair and full decision.
You're on camera and the mic's on.
We haven't started yet, Councillor Hyman.
Oh, okay, we're ready to start again. So our second application this evening, everybody, is land at April Wood, Scotland Lane, Hazelmere. This application is for the erection of 2 dwellings and a garage, associated landscaping and works, including alterations to access to provide shared vehicular access onto Scotland Lane following demolition of the existing detached garage. Dana.
Sorry, we're just opening the PowerPoint. Chair.
Ah.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. So application WA 2024-00580 at April Wood, Scotland Lane, Hazelmere, for erection of 2 dwellings and garage, associated landscaping and works, including alterations to access to provide shared vehicular access onto Scotland Lane following demolition of existing detached garage, as amended by proposed site plan showing increase in parking spaces received in 6th of June 2024. The first slide shows the site location. On the left-hand side, there is the site of April Wood outlined in red. And on the right-hand side, it's an aerial view of the site outlined in blue. The next slide shows the Hazelmere settlement boundary. And you can see in the southeast corner where the site is. Yeah, you can see where the arrow points to. And the next slide is close-up of the site location outlined in blue. So you can see that it is inside the settlement boundary of Hazelmere, and therefore it should be read in the context of the ribbon of development on Denby Road. The properties on the southern south of Scotland Lane, they are outside the settlement boundary, and they are located within countryside beyond Greenbelt and in an area of great landscape value. Therefore, they are not directly comparable to the properties on the northern side, as they are subject to different constraints. The next slide shows the existing and the proposed block plans. On the left-hand side, it's April Wood currently sitting within its plot. And on the right-hand side, it's the subdivision of plot into 3 with April Wood in the middle and plot 1 and plot 2 either side. The next slide shows some long views across the front and rear of April Wood. And you could see the distances between April Wood and the front and rear boundary. The next slide is a map showing plots and sizes, as well as separation distances between properties and Denby Road. And there is no prevailing building line on either side of Denby Road. The next one shows the corner of the application site, which measures 0.244 hectares, that subdivided into 3 will result in a density of 12 dwellings per hectare. And the plot on the other corner opposite, which measures 0.269 hectares, and includes 3 dwellings at a density of 11 dwellings per hectare. Therefore, the 2 corner plots are directly comparable. The next plan shows the distances to the front, rear and side boundaries. I'm not sure how well you can see them on that plan, but I can read them out to you. Plot 1 would be located approximately 10.3 meters to the front boundary, 14.8 meters to the rear, 2 meters to the west, and 3.3 meters separation distance to April Wood. Plot 2 would have a separation distance of 8.2 meters to Denby Road and 11 meters to Scotland Lane, and a separation of 2.75 meters to April Wood. Plot 1 and plot 3 would have each 3 parking spaces to the front of the site, and plot 2 would have a double garage as well as 2 additional parking spaces in front of the garages. And also each plot has its swift pass analysis that shows that vehicles can enter and exit the site in a forward gear. So now we're moving to the plans and elevations. These are the existing plans at April Wood, the existing elevations at April Wood, and these are photographs of the front and the rear of April Wood, the existing dwelling. Now we're moving to the proposed ground and first floor plans for plot 1, proposed second floor and roof plan for plot 1, and the proposed elevations for plot 1. And the next slide is a CGI showing what the proposed elevation will, the front elevation of plot 1 will look like. Next slide is the proposed ground floor plan for plot 2, the first floor plan, the second floor plan, and the roof plan. The proposed south and east elevations of plot 2, as well as the north and west elevations. This plot has been designed to respond to its corner plot location, therefore having 2 elevations of interest, one fronting Scotland Lane and the other one fronting Denby Road. And the next slide shows the current view of the corner and what it would look like in a CGI with plot 2, which clearly has been designed to respond to its corner location with 2 elevations of interest and a feature chimney stack in the middle. Sorry. The next CGI is a proposed frontage on Scotland Lane, so the street view with April Wood in the middle and each property either side. The following slide shows the proposed relationship between the proposal and the nearest neighbouring property. And a 45-degree sight line has been taken from the nearest rear-facing window at High Pines, which will meet plot 1 at a distance of approximately 28 meters. What is important to me to acknowledge here that this sightline test is actually up to a distance of 12 meters. So if a development meets the line anywhere within 12 meters, then it is considered to result in some harm. After 12 meters, the harm is not considered to be significant. That's why it's only ever done up to 12 meters, but I showed here the actual distance to the nearest form of development at plot 1. On the other side, we've got the distance between plot 2 and the front elevation at Fox Warren, which will be around 29 meters, and the front boundary at Fox Warren, which will be about 21 meters. And what it is important to note here is that a distance of 21 meters between windows directly facing each other is considered sufficient to prevent any undue overlooking and loss of privacy. There are some photographs from what would be the rear of plot 1 towards High Pines, what would be the rear of plot 2 towards High Pines, and the entrance to plot 2 towards Laurels and Fox Warren on Denby Road, and this is approximately where the front of plot 2 would be towards Fox Warren. You can see from the photographs that the boundaries are quite verdant, like the rest of the area, and it's important to note that the plan shows additional planting on the boundaries, and we also imposed this darker green indicates the new planting, but a condition has been imposed to ensure a landscape plan would be submitted and approved in writing prior to any works starting on site, and the plan has to clearly show all the proposed planting, including additional planting on the northern boundary to soften the additional development on site. The masters for consideration are the scale and design and impact on visual amenity, street scene and character of the area, the impact on residential amenity, parking and highway safety, trees and landscape and ecology, which are all been addressed in the report. The recommendation is for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Kim, is there a speaker from Hazelmere?
I'm not sure. Oh, no.
No, so no speaker from Hazelmere Town Council. So we have Councillor Weldon to speak for 4 minutes, please, Terry.
Thank you. I want to clarify. I am here representing specifically the residents, but as it happens, I'm also serve on the Town Planning Committee, and the Planning Committee, in fact, agreed with the residents. So, in fact, I'm speaking in two capacities. Now, I will be brief. The matter, I think, is fairly simple. Residents concerned, and I met with the residents on the spot together with our Deputy Town Clerk. I saw the site. Residents are concerned really on three issues. They believe, and the town believes, that it's a matter of overdevelopment. They fully accept that we need housing. They fully accept that we need infill, and that's fine. They just feel that 2 additional dwellings is too much. 1 they might have gone along with, 2 they feel is overdevelopment. They're also very concerned about the question of overlooking. Now, the diagram that we saw showed a 45-degree arrow from the plot number 1 to the house at High Pines. In fact, the residents of that house are less concerned about overlooking to the house than to the children's play area at the back of the garden. And I just state that for what it's worth. The third issue is one of traffic. It is pointed out clearly in the documentation. Scotland Lane at that point has a little bit of a twist to it. It's the narrowest part of Scotland Lane. The residents have concerned about safety, and not made clear in the documentation is that running alongside the Aprilwood site is a very important footpath 39. And at the point where it reaches Scotland Lane, as it was stated, it's the settlement boundary. The land then dips down quite sharply into real countryside, and the footpath continues. So it's not only a danger to vehicle traffic on the road, they believe it's also potentially a danger to pedestrian traffic wanting to cross Scotland Lane and go down into the countryside. Those really are the objections, and I'm not sure there's anything more to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any questions to officers? Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chair. I have to bring up supply of water. Hazelmere, for several years, often get drought conditions. And when we do, our water supply stops. This is because we are gravity fed from a tank. And the problem is that it lowers down and it cannot feed those on the higher points. Now, this area is on the higher point. What concerns me greatly is, yet again, as per the last report, Southeast Water, no response. Southern Water, outside. Thames Water, no response. So we've got nothing at all from the water companies. Now, I know statutorily they have to provide water, but it doesn't happen. Then what we get are tankers actually bringing water to that underground reservoir, of which, of course, everybody complains about because the carbon and all the rest of it is thrown into the environment because it can't cope. Now, the problem is we are continually getting applications on these higher points to build houses. So I'd like to ask the officers about why we're not getting reports from the water companies in their supply.
So conscious of time, and I don't want to go into massive detail, but water supply is a strategic matter. As part of your plan making process, you talk to the water companies, identify the level of development that's going to happen within an area, and collectively agree a infrastructure delivery plan. It's a strategic matter. We do consult the water companies on individual planning applications, but there is there's a statutory requirement for water companies to allow connection to the water system. So we do consult them, but there's another process that goes on outside the planning system relating to the connection to the water supply. So the position within the borough is that we do not have any direction to or embargo on development because of water supply. The water companies are aware of the growth agenda that exists as set out in the local plan, and therefore, for the purposes of this evening, members, you might conclude that trying to determine whether there is adequate water supply to serve 2 dwellings in the borough is maybe something that, as a committee, you can sort of take as read that there will be sufficient water supply for these 2 dwellings were planning permission granted.
Thank you. Councillor Rubini.
Yeah, thank you. If I could just come back on the water supply has nothing to do with the borough. It's Hazelmere. It's completely its own supply. It has its own reservoir and it doesn't feed any other part of the borough. I must say I'm concerned that we are doing this without any response from the water company, because we all know that it will happen again as soon as we get a lot of hot water and they're not supplying it. Now, I don't know what sanctions we've got against water companies for not supplying, but we here on the committee are allowing this to continue, and I have absolutely no doubt in my own mind that when we do get these droughts, this will be one of the places that won't get water.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No. So do we have anybody wanting to debate this application? Councillor Rubini.
Yes, thank you. I agree with what Councillor Weldon said earlier. I've looked at this area and I feel that it's overdevelopment by keeping the house that is there and then trying to squeeze in 2 more either side of it. I came to the same conclusion as many others, that 2 on this plot would be acceptable, no problem. But to try and squeeze them in, I think is doing exactly what they say, it's squeezing them in. The other problem I have is the height, the 3 levels. If I could ask the officer, could I see that slide again, please, of plot 1, where it actually shows you the height? It does look a massive building from the photograph, or the sketch. Now that doesn't show the 3rd, does it? If you go back to that other slide, you'll see there's a window in the top. Is that the rear and side? But of course, the sketch doesn't show
So this
anything
is
on
the
the 3rd
rear.
floor.
I don't know if you can see. So, sorry, this is the front. This is the rear, and these are the 2 sides. So that's the front, top here, and rear. It is what we would call a 2-story house with rooms in the roof space.
Okay. Obviously, as a person, an individual, I think it's overdevelopment. I also think it's out of character, because I know Denby Road, I used to live in it, and I don't recall many of 3 stories, which I call 3-story.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Austin.
Thank you. Just to say, I think the architecture of these is interesting and appears to be sympathetic into the house already existing in the centre. I do agree that ideally on the site you would have 2 houses instead of 3. But as you can't move the house that's already in existence in the middle, I get that we have to work with what we've got. And so on balance, I think it's acceptable. And I just, I'm pleased with the attention that's been paid to the architecture of the houses.
Thank you. Any other speakers? So we have a recommendation. The recommendation is to agree this with conditions. So, oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor Weldon. I'm so sorry. It's 9:02. You have a chance to speak again. I beg your pardon.
Just one very, very simple point. Among the proposal, as we have it, they are included a number of conditions, and one condition specifies a need for a landscaping plan that I totally support. A little bit of background is that part of the residents' anger is that there used to be a number of trees to the side of April Wood which were unexpectedly demolished, which of course the owner was allowed to do, but they're very concerned about that, and we welcome the proposal for to ask for a landscape survey. Thank you, and to replant the trees, I think it says. But yeah, we welcome that proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weldon. So without any other speakers, the recommendation is to grant with the conditions. So when it shows, please vote. Green is for agreement and red is against.
Thank you, Chair. That's 11 in favour, 1 abstention and none against. So therefore it's carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we come to the next application, which is WA 2024-00807, land at Wintershall Cottage, Thorncombe Street in Bramley. I'll carry on talking because it's late. This is for a retrospective application for an agricultural building with ancillary staff, welfare facilities and workshop. Sam, ready when you are.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. The next application under consideration at committee is WA 2024-00807 on land at Wintershall Farm in Thorncombe Street for retrospective permission for the erection of an agricultural building for use as a lambing barn with ancillary staff welfare facilities that include a workshop, rest area and temporary overnight accommodation. This application has been brought before the Planning Committee at the request of the Ward Councillor to consider impact on the Surrey Hills National Landscape. The site is in the Surrey Hills, AGLV and Greenbelt outside settlement. Wintershall Valley Farm is accessed on Thorncombe Street, a single track public road, which runs to the southwest of the site. The 93-hectare farmstead comprises largely open pasture land set within an undulating valley with small pockets of woodland. Wintershall is a typical grassland farm, largely comprising beef and sheep production. The proposed building, which is substantially complete and in use as evidenced on the officer's site visit, is accessed via a gravel track that runs up the valley to the wider Wintershall estate before splitting off and heading north along the Greensand Hill towards the lambing barn. Site level steeply slope down the valley to the west with a bank of high trees immediately to the west of the building and a parcel of ancient woodland located around 200 metres to the southeast. These are the elevation plans showing the size of the lambing barn that has been built. It's about 30 metres in depth, 35 metres wide and 9.6 metres in height. The proposed building includes a large vaulted barn area which houses ewes and lambs during lambing season in hayed pens. In addition to the main livestock area, 2 side additions and canopies include staff area with accommodation, a workshop area and external areas for storage of machinery. The staff area includes a kitchen, WC, seating area and temporary overnight accommodation on the first floor. So these are ground floor plans with the main barn, staff unit and workshop area. And then, so that's the first floor plan showing the temporary overnight accommodation in the staff area. So these are site visit photos that were taken on the 16th of May. Picture shows the front elevation of the barn, looking northeast with the staff rest area in the foreground. The building has timber weatherboarding and metal corrugated roof, like many agricultural buildings in the Surrey Hills. This is the rear elevation showing the canopies for external storage. And then you've got the main barn, internal photo of the main barn area showing the Hayde pens. So the closest public view is from footpath 262, which is located approximately 400 metres from the building to the north, looking south. You can see from the photograph, you can just about make out the building, which officers consider does sit within the landscape and would be read as an agricultural building involved in the maintenance of the wider landscape. So the main matters for members are the impact on the Greenbelt and impact on the Surrey Hills. In relation to the Greenbelt, the site is appropriate development as it falls within the exemption listed within paragraph 154 of the NPPF, that being for agriculture and forestry. The farm has 200 ewes which would be housed within the main barn. Given the distance from the main buildings, the staff area would be reasonably necessary, used by vets brought in for overnight periods during the lambing season to ensure welfare of the livestock. However, officers are mindful of concerns that such accommodation could be used for alternative purposes, and a suitably worded condition to ensure the accommodation is only used by agricultural workers between February and June each year would be appropriate in this respect. In relation to impact on the Surrey Hills, whilst comments of objection from the Surrey Hills Advisor and CPRE are noted regarding size and scale, it is highly material that the General Permitted Development Order under Part 6 allows agricultural businesses to erect a building which is reasonably necessary for the purposes of agriculture within that unit, up to 12 metres in height and 1,500 square metres in size. Therefore, the applicant could build a lambing barn 2.3 metres taller and 425 square metres larger than the proposal here, situated just 25 metres to the northeast in a more prominent position closer to the public footpath and away from the bank of trees to the west without the need for planning permission. On top of this, comments have stated a domestication of the site. As stated already, the planning unit is agricultural and a condition has been imposed limiting the overnight accommodation for agricultural workers only between February and June. Views mentioned by the CPRE, including Winkworth Arboretum, is 1.4 kilometres away to the west with intervening trees, and footpath 262, which has shown 400 metres away to the north, and which officers consider views would be acceptable. Furthermore, officers note policy P4 of the Surrey Hills Management Plan supports development that would assist the future of an agricultural business. There is also the presumption in favour of the development in paragraph 88 of the NPPF for the diversification of agriculture and other land-based rural businesses. For all these points, officers are recommending approval of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have 3 speakers, the first of which is William Pedder. So you have 4 minutes from when you start speaking. Thank you.
Chair, members. I speak for the 14 objectors, most of whom are from the Thorncombe Valley above which this barn sits. You'll have seen from the public comments the stark contrast between those who object on grounds of visual harm to the national landscape and supporters in favour of agricultural development. Well, the balance on that has been set at national level, such that agriculture has priority to the extent permitted by permitted development rights. And the as-built barn would have been so permitted. So we understand that the barn will stand as built. But our other, and in fact greater, objection or concern is to forestall any future use or development of this barn for residential or commercial purposes. The officer's suggested condition touches on that, but in our view, too limply. The sharp-eyed will have noticed that the statutory order of May this year, which extended the permitted size of agricultural buildings, also significantly extended PDRs to permit agricultural conversion to up to 10 dwellings. Class Q, I believe it's called, and Class R was at the same time extended to permit conversion to commercial use for up to 1,000 square metres, which just happens to be the size of this barn. Now, national landscapes and parks were excluded from that extension, which does not therefore apply to this case, certainly at present. But there was widespread expectation and strong and continuing lobbying that classes Q and I would apply to national landscapes and parks, either now or in the future. Under a new government, that could be done at the stroke of a pen. Objectors therefore respectfully request that tighter conditions are imposed than those proposed, or that single one proposed in the officer's report. We understand the applicant is agreeable to this, provided there is no restriction on agricultural development, if so permitted. So specifically, we ask that no commercial or residential use or development should be permitted in future. Clive Smith, the advisor to the Surrey Hills National Landscapes, suggests this is done by a covenant on the land. Well, perhaps I would have thought an Article 4 removal of future PDRs could be the way. Or maybe tight planning conditions would suffice. Whatever the technicalities, we ask the committee to use the appropriate instrument to disallow any future commercial or residential development on this site. We make no suggestion that it is the applicant's intention to develop this site for commercial or residential use. The Fidian Greens farming operation is highly commendable and we warmly support it. But intentions or ownership can change. That is why safeguarding is needed to ensure the beauty of our national landscape for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we have Henrietta Fidian Green to speak. So Henrietta, you have 4 minutes from when you start.
Do I have to press any buttons? I just go. Okay. Good evening, councillors. I'm here to speak in support of my application for the lowing barn at our property, Winchell Valley Farm. Thank you to you all and my family who are here and supporters for coming out tonight. I operate a farm which comprises of 290 acres south of Godalming. There has been a lot of local confusion as our land was part of a bigger estate, the Wintershall estate, where I was born, lived all my life, and that estate was divided into 4 new holdings 7 years ago. This was when I began my own farm. I'm completely independent from my siblings who owned land at Honeymead, Gate Street and Slade's Farm. Having now planted over 4,000 trees, 2,000 metres of mixed English hedges, shelter belts for wild birds, working closely with Protect Earth and FIPL, I'm passionate about woodland, wildlife and the farmland that had previously been undermanaged and overgrazed. I became and began regenerative farming here, restoring and improving soil health naturally using limited numbers of animals in rotation to fertilise. I'm fiercely opposed to any artificial fertilisers and chemical sprays. Most of my lamb, beef and pork is sold locally to my son's restaurant. He was born and lives here and will take over the farm in the future. I also sell locally and do everything possible to keep our carbon footprint to a minimum. We have had 2 successful lambing seasons in this barn with dramatically improved survival rate, which I know is a direct result of good ventilation, lack of humidity in the barn, protecting the ewes from pneumonia, keeping lambs safe from foxes and badgers, which totally prevent outside lambing. The barn includes a small welfare area with basic facilities for farm workers, vet students, and visiting children. We've had several successful local schools visits. Going forward, I want to start an education programme for young people to benefit and learn more about the importance of British farming, where food comes from, and good animal welfare. In summary, the barn is to be used for agricultural purposes only. Any temporary but essential overnight accommodation will be limited to the lambing period. We are aware, and as stated by your officer, the revised agricultural permitted development rights on the 21st of May this year would now permit us to build a barn even greater floor area and height. We will continue settling this barn into the landscape of the Surrey Hills sensitively. We have planted over 100 indigenous trees, creating a future woodland to the north and the south sides of this barn. Reducing the size of the lambing barn will have huge impact on our flock, the viability of the farm going forward. Can I finish? Okay, thanks. Leading to potential loss of jobs to our farm workers, and agricultural apprentice vet students would have to go elsewhere for their essential work placement. And as we know, farms in this area are closing all the time. I know of 4 in the last 12 months. Reducing the size of this barn and welfare facility will prevent the chance of creating for the next generation a future education programme for children's schools to see farming in Britain, in our area, why we do it, how important it is to our countryside. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have to say to members of the public, you have to be silent.
Sorry. Children.
Yeah, children. Thank you very much. I believe there is another speaker, the clerk from Bramley Parish. On Zoom. Okay. Do I go?
Hello.
Hello, you have 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
Okay. So I'm speaking on behalf of Bramley Parish Council. Bramley Parish Council object to this application. The barn, which has been constructed on a hill, is 3.65 metres higher than that granted under the prior approval and is clearly visible at a distance from the hill. It constitutes an unsightly intrusion into the landscape. The planning officer presents an argument which is more in support of development of an agricultural enterprise and less in favour of conserving and enhancing the landscape or protecting the greenbelt land from inappropriate development. At the same time, he acknowledges that the development was not constructed in line with the permitted development scheme, and the substantially complete building proposed here for retrospective permission would not be permitted development, as it would fall within 400 metres of Valley Cottage. PD requires that animals are not accommodated in agricultural buildings within 400 metres of a residential building. This calls into question the integrity of the applicant and also the construction company, who should have been aware of both the size of the permitted development and the conditions attached to it. The applicant did not notify the council before beginning the development of this new and larger barn, as they should have done so in line with condition 2.1 of the Part 6 Class A prior approval procedure. A cynic might be tempted to observe that the applicant has waited for the planning officer, who refused AG 2020/0015 and AG 2020/0019 to leave Waverley Borough Council and join Planet Consulting, the very firm that the applicant uses, in the hope that a successor planning officer, would wave through this oversized development that does not comply with AG 2020/0021 and does not comply with Class A Part 6 of the Schedule 2 of the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Order 2015 as amended. Whilst the Parish Council has sympathy with the applicant's need for a lambing barn, this development is substantially larger than that for which the permitted development scheme was granted and is larger than necessary for a lambing barn for 200 ewes. This is understood to be the size of the applicant's flock. The original design was for 500 square metres. 200 lambing ewes require a floor space of between 300 and 465 square metres, i.e. 16 to 25 square feet per lambing ewe. So the original design would have been adequate for the applicant's flock. The new build has over 700 square metres of floor space in the main barn area, 55 square metres for staff facilities and 55 square metres for a workshop. The parish council is also mindful that the applicant is one of a family with a history of disregard for the planning system and who have the unhappy habit of submitting retrospective applications. The building is unnecessarily larger than that approved under the permitted development scheme. To approve this application is therefore to send a message to the public that Waverley Borough Council are quite happy to endorse retrospective applications that otherwise would not get approval. Family Parish Council therefore politely requests that the committee reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I shall ask whether you have questions shortly, but when we are considering applications, we are supposed to be considering the facts in front of us and not supposition or views of others. Councillor Jane Austen. Yes, yes. And I'm not sure you gave notice of speaking, but would you like to have 4 minutes? Beg your pardon?
Sorry, anyway, I thought you automatically got your 4 minutes as ward councillor.
I think you're supposed to give notice, but would you like 4 minutes?
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you for consideration of this application, which I felt was important to be brought to this planning committee to reflect the objections lodged by Bramley Parish Council, Hascombe Parish Council, the National Landscape Officer, formerly AONB, and CPRE, the Campaign for Protection of Rural England, plus the many comments for and against from local people. May I at the outset state I completely support this local business, but the issue at stake here is compliance with planning law and the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. This application seeks to regularise a development which was not constructed in accordance with permitted development as submitted. Previous applications have been made on this site and rejected, notably in 2020 and 21. An application approved in 2021 was not implemented correctly, and this building sits 25 metres closer to Valley Cottage than allowed under permitted development rights. But it is the siting of this building which is so controversial. We're talking about a large and prominent building at a beautiful hilltop site overlooking one of the most beautiful valleys in Surrey, outside any settlement boundary, within the Surrey Hills National Landscape, formerly called AONB, and within the AJLV. While I note and support the applicant's lambing business, it is extraordinary that they would choose to site this agricultural building here, simply using permitted development as a reason. The applicant could have easily submitted, just as easily have submitted a regular application to site the building on any other and less prominent part of their ownership. Concerns have been raised by local people as to the long-term reason for the siting of this building here, including future conversion to residential use and concerns about the potential existing residential use of the site. The AONB officer is concerned there is a serious omission in addressing the new legal requirement within the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act as set out in his planning advice. How can permitting this large building on a hilltop possibly fulfil the now, again, legal requirement to conserve and enhance the natural beauty of an unspoilt tract of national landscape? A reason for overriding this might be because the development is otherwise in the public interest. But what public interest is served through granting permission for the development? Without a proper written planning justification that should be in the committee report for overriding this legal requirement, the council should take legal advice as to whether there may be grounds for a legal challenge for permission should someone or body be so minded to take that course. Second, I'm concerned councillors in determining the application will not have taken into account the AONB planning advice because the summary in the report is insufficient and in parts possibly misleading. The committee is perfectly entitled to disagree with the office's view that the siting of this building does not harm the national landscape. It is a matter of judgment. The Surrey Hills officer noted to me that it is rare he would express such a strong concern as he did from the outset of giving this AONB advice. He feels very strongly the harm to the national landscape AONB is significant. Finally, should the committee be minded to approve this application, I would like to discuss how we avoid the future opportunity for future residential dwelling and request strengthened formal conditions to settle this building in the location. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I come to questions, I have a question myself for our officer. I believe, and I would like clarification, but I believe that you said that under permitted development, there could be a barn. That barn could be closer to the right of way. That barn could be bigger than this barn that we're considering. And presumably it could be of any colour and made of any material. Is that correct?
Yes, in essence. So they did have 3 PD schemes, 2 of which were refused, and then the 3rd was granted. It was on a sort of technicality about siting away from a protected building. It was so the development before you is not permitted development, but they could build a larger barn, 2.3 metres taller, 425 square metres larger, sited 25 metres to the northwest. So it would be out 400 metres from a protected building, which in the case of Part 6 is a residential dwelling. So in that case, it would be a larger building closer to the public footpath, away from a bank of trees in a more prominent position. So that should be afforded substantial weight in the planning balance.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Coburn.
Yes, I really want to know, what we can actually do to protect this. I think, it's gone too far down the line to object to this. I think, probably reluctantly we have to accept this. But, I do understand what the AONB officer is saying and indeed what the previous speaker said. So what we've got in the 2 conditions are, not really quite as all-encompassing, but do we actually have the power, is what I'm really asking, to strengthen these so that we are, really trying to avoid this ever becoming, into residential use? What powers do we actually have, please?
So I do believe the condition is strong enough. It's an agricultural planning unit. It is solely for an agricultural worker. Between the applicant has agreed to a February-June period, which aligns with the lambing season. We also have to be quite mindful of restricting PD rights. There is a strong presumption against such restriction. It could be seen to be not MPPF compliant in that it would be unreasonable and not related to the development before here. So I personally think the condition there is strong enough, and a further condition restricting residential development would not be needed.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Sorry, I think Councillor Coburn's sort of taken my question, and it's always a tricky one. I personally understand how difficult it is being a farmer in this day and age. I totally get it. But my question is, I agree with Councillor Coburn that obviously we have to look at the conditions set. Well, 2 questions really. First, how do we actually enforce that only agricultural workers, only during those times, stay in that unit? I mean, what is the enforcement mechanism there? And secondly, my naivety, apologies, but but I don't understand how offering a worser option as a determination factor, ergo we could have built it here, but decided not to. Why does that factor in? Thank you.
Shall I come in and start, and I'll do the second question first. So your fallback position in planning is a significant material consideration. You have to look at what could happen without the need for planning permission and factor that into your decision making. So SANS clearly set out what could happen without the need for planning permission. And that is material consideration for you this evening. In terms of the enforcement position, as with all conditions, one of the tests is that they're enforceable, but to a certain extent, and particularly in remote locations, we don't have planning enforcement officers roaming the countryside in the late night of whatever the dates are to check who's in that space. So there is an element of risk with that. And obviously we would probably be relying on reports from residents seeing lights there, and then we would visit and monitor the situation to see whether there was a breach and act accordingly, either by serving a breach of condition notice or enforcement notice, were we to establish that there was a breach.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Rabini.
Thank you, Chair. After many years on planning committees, I still do not like retrospective planning applications, because why do people do it? Shouldn't it be done properly in the first place? On this occasion, I can see that if there is the ability to build something bigger in the same place, then it is difficult to know whether this committee should refuse it and then demand that the building be taken down to build something bigger. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. But as I say, I do not like retrospective building. I would far prefer the person, to be honest, and come here first.
Thank you. I'm not sure that was a question, but is there anybody who'd like to further debate this? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few words. This looks like a farm building because it is a farm building. It's a farm building on a farm. And where do we find farms? We find farms in the countryside. What is more important, farming or unadulterated and virgin views of the countryside? I know I'm being a little bit cynic, but I think farms do deserve our support, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. No other speakers? So Councillor Austin, would you like to sum up?
Thank you. I personally also agree that buildings should be on farms. I think the concern here is that this building did not have to be sited right on the top of the hill with the views that it has, and there are concerns about the future use of the building and the precedent that may be set. I've been told by the AONB officer that there could be such thing as a covenant put on the land against a future residential use for this, or an Article 4 informative. I'd also request a further condition to formally settle the building in the land with vegetation is added. So I suppose that's a question for the planning officers, really. I personally think that the condition is insufficient. It's not enforceable, and it should be strengthened in respect of the future residential use. And I think we need an additional condition in respect of settling the building in the land. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Austin. As that didn't come out of our discussions, I think we will move directly to the vote. And the vote is or the recommendation is that this is granted subject to the conditions. Those in favour, please, or those vote now.
Sorry, I was miscalculating there, Chair. That's 12 in favour. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that is carried. And at 20 to 10, we have two applications still ahead of us. We have land at Farnham Liberal Club. So thank you very much, Sam. Good night.
These farmers.
Yes. Safe drive home, Sam. Alistair, over to you.
So the application here is at the Farnham Liberal Club. I'll just quickly go through the proposal. Change of use from a social club to a restaurant and public house, demolition of an existing ground floor extension at the rear of the building, and erection of a part two-story extension, including a first floor terrace. So the application did attract quite a bit of objection initially. The applicant engaged with objectors and submitted two sets of amended drawings. So it's the second set of amended drawings today that we are considering. In addition, there has actually been a very small amendment submitted just today in response to the Surrey County Council Highways officers comment that they did not wish to see a side door opening over the pavement and obstructing pedestrians. So I'll just run through the presentation. Right. Which button am I pushing here?
Sorry, could you just repeat that about the Surrey Highways? I didn't quite hear the.
Yes, sorry. There was a comment from Surrey County Council Highways officer that they wanted to amend a side door on the Brightwells Road frontage, which we'll see in plan form at the moment. It's a very minor objection, but it does mean there's an additional amendment to be added for today, which was actually just received this morning. And it's simply the direction of opening of a door so it doesn't obstruct the pavement when it's open. Okay, so. Okay, so the site, the aerial view of the site, perhaps we just go to the next slide, which is, oh, sorry, I missed the plan there. The location plan shows the site on the corner of Brightwells Road and South Street. A view down South Street here showing the building and in relation to the Methodist Church to the south of it. We go to the next slide. This is the modern extension built around about 1970, which would be demolished. So the next slide. And then to the rear of the building, through the Faulkner Arch, which is on Brightwells Road, we have Victoria Gardens. So this is the ground and first floor. I've just indicated on the plan there the length of the extension and then also indicated the roof terrace, which is at first floor level. So if we go to the next, same again really, but so depth of extension at ground and first floor level, and then going right back to the roof slope. So if we go to the next one, this is the Brightwells Road elevation, which has been amended by changes to the fenestration and addition of a screen around the terrace at the top. These are, so we've got the rear elevation here, which would be towards Victoria Gardens. Only the left-hand side of that would really be visible due to being screened by the Faulkner Arch. And now we've got some CGIs showing similar view to the first photograph. Second CGI, again on Brightwells Road. And just to note here that amongst the amendments, there's a reveal essentially of the full length of the cat slide roof on this elevation, which wasn't in the previous, the originally submitted drawings. And then the last view here is from the gardens. That's all the slides. The recommendation in terms of the recommendations for approval, there are some updates just in terms of the drawings which I mentioned a moment ago. There's been a BAT survey submitted in response to condition 11 as recommended. That will need to go through the normal process of consultation or of the discharge of condition. So at this stage, it's late to be submitting that in response to a condition. And the last point I just wanted to make was the Methodist Church did withdraw their objections, both in terms of design and more recently in terms of odour and noise, having read the report and seen the condition which is recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a speaker. Mr. Hanrahan, you have 4 minutes from when you start.
If I'm quick, we might get to watch some penalties, so I'll hurry up. Good evening, members. My name is Niall Hanrahan, and I head up Heritage Potential, a heritage arm of Planning Potential. I'm dual qualified in both planning and heritage, and I'm representing the applicant, Springmark Limited, this evening. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Alistair for his comprehensive officer report in relation to the application. The application relates to the Liberal Club, designed by Edwin Lutyens in 1895. The front elevation demonstrates Lutyens experimenting with a Queen Anne style and displays a high degree of symmetry and quality of materials. The undecorated flank wall to Brightwells Road is evidence of the original intention for a neighbouring building to be built prior to Brightwells Road being conceived and eventually laid out. The single-storey rear portion of the building constitutes a poorly designed 1970s remodelling of the building, which unfortunately also meant the loss of the internal plan form and historic fabric over the preceding decades. Sorry. Today, the building is in clear need of investment into its surviving historic fabric and also presents an opportunity for enhancement of unsympathetic additions. The proposal is to change the building into a restaurant will bring much needed investment to this local farmhome asset, restoring historic fabric and bringing it back into economic and social use. The proposed use is policy compliant and encouraged in the town centre. The proposal presented is a result of a considered design process, including working collaboratively with stakeholders pre and post submission. We've sought to work together to ensure an appropriate design given the historic context and to respond positively to any concerns raised. We're delighted to see these efforts have resulted in the removal of objections from the Farnham Society and the neighbouring Methodist Church. The revisions have resulted in the Conservation Officer finding no harm with the proposals. We've also achieved the backing of the Lutyens Trust. We're aware that concerns have been raised from neighbours in relation to noise and odour. We would emphasise that the proposal is for a high-end restaurant with a Michelin-trained head chef and executive chef on board. And so noise associated with the terrace is likely to be limited to discussion and the use of cutlery. We have also sought to screen the terrace to further mitigate against noise and ensure privacy for users of Victoria Gardens. The applicant is happy to accept the recommended conditions in relation to noise management, odour control, and limits to the hours of use contained within the officer's report. Such conditions will also safeguard against future uses of the building. We are pleased that officers are able to recommend this application for approval, and we hope that members will be able to support the proposals following the positive changes that we've made throughout the process. Design is naturally subjective, particularly involving listed buildings, but we're delighted to have arrived at a balanced design that is both high quality and interesting in the spirit of Lutyens, and also ensures subservience to the South Street elevation and Faulkner Arch. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hanrahan. Do we have any questions? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I noted from a letter from the Methodist Church that they are concerned about the smells, the odours emanating from the kitchen. And I note from the report that they are proposing, the applicant is proposing internal ventilation. Now, that seems contradictory in terms. Could perhaps, does the officer know what this actually means?
The proposal for internal ventilation came about due to objections to a chimney at the rear, or a new chimney at the rear of the building, which has been removed in the drawings under consideration now. There are ventilation ducts and extractors would be mounted on the south wall of the building, which would be essentially screened by the adjacent church. The objections from the Methodist Church were subsequently removed in another letter, which I believe actually only went online in the last day or two. Having read the report, as I mentioned earlier, and seen the conditions that were proposed, they were happy to remove their objection on those grounds.
Thank you. Any further questions? Anyone wishing to debate? Councillor Coburn.
Well, I just think, thank goodness. I mean, you know, we've had this beautiful frontage for long, which has been crumbling before our eyes. When we did our walk around the conservation area sometime, we wrote to all the owners. And I mean, this one really from the front was just literally sort of falling apart. And as for that side wall, I mean, it's one of the ugliest walls we've got in Farnham. You know, it's got no redeeming features whatsoever. The shape, everything about it's wrong. So I was just delighted that we're actually, well, somebody's going to spend money on it, not me. And as for smells, I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but walking past the Liberal Club sometimes, the current smells are not that exciting, a bit greasy, you know, and that sort of thing. So I just think this is just a win-win. And if we can get the frontage of that Lutyens building looking, you know, as it should, if we can improve the back and, as you say, put in some, you know, features, modern features that will help with the smells and everything else, I just think it's a win-win. And thank goodness we're actually going to get that building, I'm going to say tarted up. That's not really quite a planning way, but improved architecturally. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I don't see any other speakers. So we move to the recommendation, which is to grant with conditions and informatives. When the lights show, please vote.
Thank you, Chair. That's 13 in favour, no abstentions, none against, therefore it's carried.
So that is carried, and the next application is for listed planning consent. So unless I see anybody wanting to question or debate, I think that is agreed. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. So our next application is, and we'll just dash it along, not quite 10 o'clock.
Presentation. Or we should be up. I can log in.
Yeah.
I'm just going to log on and put it up. Water was already up. Need to get my phone. Is it not already up there? Should be. No. That's in my bag. I'll get it.
I tell you what, I'll put it up.
Yeah, that would be easier.
Machine down to have it up. There's a point that is stayed off in. Desktop. Well, I thought we would be sharing it. So. Watch the replay.
We need to do this differently.
Well, that's why I organised it so that I was talking and then the presentation was just there.
Have to allow that as there's no discussion going on.
What he was presenting just then. So maybe that came up and. Unless you've got it up and okay.
Nearly there.
You didn't respond to my email earlier, but it's okay about.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Sorry,
The data's got out of it. No, it's one of those issues where like the answer's there. It's just making sure that I guess we're ready to give it. I suppose.
Yeah. Okay.
If I don't think they're going to be.
No.
But I'm for the corridor anyway. But yeah, you saw what I sent in the MP.
Yeah.
Talking about the circumstances that you can rely on more strategic purposes.
Yeah.
I think that
Just a
probably
last
does.
sentence in there.
Yeah, so I think it probably does.
Oh,
Follow
definitely.
that we can rely on the part 2 one.
Definitely does.
So yeah, no, I'm happy with it. I'm just pleased. Yeah, pleased that we went through it just in case. It's just that a couple of years ago we used to come up with things and pleased to
Another one coming up as well. Go submit an application, talking about shadow assessments and stuff. So yeah, make sure they do that. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's going to be. I think they need to do one because the oh yeah, there's going to be impact on the spas. Within the closest one to here because it's a town centre. Yeah, it's kind of
Calling everybody back to order.
okay. Good evening, councillors. This is the application at Kide Place on St George's Road near Badshot Lee. Is for an allocated site for 3 additional Gypsy and Traveller plots. So sites that shown there with a red arrow. It's opposite Barley Meadows, which is a new development of 69 dwellings. And the site backs onto the Tice Meadow sink, which is the site of nature conservation interest to the rear. And it is just to the south of a model racing cars track, I should specify. And also a building of locally listed merit a bit further to the north. So, the next slide, please. So, yeah, just an aerial of the site showing the racing car track to the north and the site context. So, the site is currently comprised of one Gypsy and Traveller plot, which comprises a caravan and a day room, which is facilities for the occupiers in terms of a living kitchen and bathroom, sleeping accommodation within the mobile home, which sits at the front of the site. Next slide, please. So you can see it's called a mobile home, but effectively it is a static building, same as what is being proposed here. So here's the site location plan. So you've got the 3 additional, again, they said mobile homes, but they are static caravans, if you want to call them that, and the day room building, which provides, as I said, kind of living accommodation. Also proposed is 2 parking spaces for each unit and a gate to the front, then adjacent to the stable block. And you've also got some biodiversity enhancements in terms of bird boxes and landscaping scheme. So the occupants of the 3 pitches would be the applicant and his wife and their wider family, including their children, totaling 14 individuals. So there you go, you've got the day room floor plans showing basically what the building contains. Next slide, please. The elevations, which the building's going to be constructed of red brick with a Spanish slate roof, metal framed windows and doors. Next slide, please. Photos of the front of the site from the road. So you've got a splayed access onto the highway, a gated access as well. As I said, this is an allocated site for 3 additional gypsy and traveller plots. Other designations are that it is countryside beyond the green belt. It's within the Farnham Aldershot strategic cap. It's within 5 kilometres of the Thames Basin Heath special protection area, and it's flood zone 1. And as I said earlier, it's considered to be within the setting of a building of local merit, which is the kiln, just a bit further to the north. Next slide, please. So the consultation on this is that 3 objections have been received, but it's at planning committee today because it's been called in by councillors during the process of application. None of the consultees raised any concerns, or their concerns have been addressed via condition and amendments to the application. Next slide. So on the scheme, officers are recommending approval subject to the conditions laid out in the report and the Section 106 agreement to secure financial contribution to SANG. And the key issues are there to see, as I've kind of touched upon, really. The noise report recommended by Environmental Health to avoid it being kind of submitted at a later date. Surrey highways are satisfied on transport and highways grounds, and there is no adverse impact on biodiversity or the sink to the rear of the site, subject to landscaping and other ecological conditions.
Thank you. Thank you, Russell. We have 2 speakers, Councillors Merriweather and MacLeod. You both have up to 4 minutes to speak, but you don't feel obliged to use them. Councillor Merriweather.
I promise. Right. Thank you. Chair, there's no question, there's absolutely no question that we support the development of new gypsy and traveller sites for our fellow residents who need them. And this site's been allocated for a net gain of 3 pitches in our local plan. And while it's also good practice for new pitches to include amenity buildings, government guidance does tell us that for planning purposes, we need to consider design decisions on a case-by-case basis, and especially so for small private sites like this. The local plan allocation for this site specifically provides for modest intensification, and it's against that we have to balance the proposals here, which include a new day room block, which alone would be a permanent structure similar in scale to the existing stable block, which is already the largest structure on the site. The LPP2 allocation also identifies constraints, which include some provisions of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan. So it's astonishing that this report omits to mention both of the 2 submissions from Farnham Town Council objecting strongly to this application. They're on the website. They object on the grounds of overdevelopment, over-intensification, contrary to policies FNP1, FNP10, FNP11 and FNP20 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, which specifically relate to the design of new development and conservation, protecting and enhancing the countryside, preventing the coalescence between Farnham and Aldershot, and controlling the use of rural buildings for business purposes, which is another concern that's been raised in this case. It also seems that the report does not address, let alone resolve, many of the other concerns raised by Tice's Meadow Bird Group, not only with regards to biodiversity, but also, for example, as regards the setting. Section 14 of the report incorrectly states that the site is not directly adjacent to Tice's Meadow when it is actually to the east, and it is clearly visible from Tice's Meadow too. This is all the more significant because Tice's Meadow is not only a site of nature conservation importance, but it has been public land since 2021, when it was acquired by Surrey County Council with our full and our financial support. Indeed, the Burr Group's submission includes extracts from an appeal inspector's decision upholding refusal on another application where this was one deciding factor. And incidentally, the report also doesn't identify another important neighbour, the popular Badshot Community Garden, which sits immediately adjacent to part of the northern boundary of the site from which visitors can also see it. Finally, there's also unease that the report has not adequately resolved concerns and recommendations from the Surrey Wildlife Trust, including, just by way of example, regarding a bat roost assessment and sensitive lighting. So can I thank you in advance for also taking these important matters into consideration, not least Farnham Town Council's objections. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor MacLeod, did you want to speak?
Very briefly, Chair, just to say that I support what Councillor Merriweather has said. A couple of brief comments, actually. In terms of the Town Council's objection, they were particularly concerned about business being carried out on this site and the number of heavy vehicles and so on the site. The applicant does apparently run a roofing business, so we need to be aware of that, and perhaps there needs to be conditions about that if this application is granted. Also concerned about the fact, I believe some of this, like Councillor Rubini, I don't really like retrospective application. I think there are things being built on this site already without planning permission, so I'll just make that comment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, members, I've just checked online and there is an objection online that I can see dating from 2019. So the report obviously hasn't picked that up or addressed in the report the objection. So I suggest that we defer this item for the next committee. Can I just say, as a matter of course, and this isn't, I hope this lands in the way it's intended, it would have been really helpful, members, if you brought this to my attention earlier and I could have taken it off the agenda and made sure.
I'd love to. I was doing my homework in just in the minutes before I came in. So if I'd done it earlier, of course I would.
Fine. So
equally, Chair, if I was aware, I would have informed the officers. I only recently looked at the subject. It wasn't in my ward until recently, actually, due to the boundary changes. It was originally Webburn and Bagshot Lee. It's now Moor Park, which is my ward. So I wasn't so familiar with this application as normally I would be.
Okay.
But I would have informed the officers if I'd been aware of it.
Understood. I suggest we defer the application.
Okay. Can I just clarify? There are two objections from Farnham Town Council. They're both up on the website. That's where I found them.
Yeah, and I've just found those now by checking. So we'll defer the application. Well, I agree, and I'm sure we all agree to defer for this evening, and we will return to this. So thank you very much, everybody, for your patience. It's been a long evening. Over.